Okay, now I know it might not look like it's fall, especially here, but fall is upon us. And if you're a new gardener, there are certain things that you should really keep in mind when it comes to fall gardening, especially if this is your first fall garden. There is a huge difference between spring, summer, fall, and winter. And the fall garden, to me, is my favorite. Now, I love a spring garden, but there are benefits and drawbacks to a fall garden that I think we should seriously talk about. So in this video, I want to go over 5 things that I wish I had known prior to starting gardening, especially transitioning into fall. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what's the big deal? It's just, another season. Well, it is a huge season because spring and fall are kind of relatively the same to a point. And it's these points that I think are important enough for me to take the time to sit here and talk to y'all, especially, again, if you're a new gardener or if this is, say, your first fall garden in a while. Maybe you've taken some time off. Maybe your zones are just, too much when it hits fall. I don't know, but there are definitely some differences that you should take into account of when fall gets here, and especially if you're going to plant a fall garden. And hopefully if you are, you've already been preparing and you're ready to rock and roll. But let's start right here. So right off the bat, what's the difference between spring and fall? Well, a big difference, at least for me and from everything I've seen and heard of while talking to everybody here on YouTube, are the pests. Think about this. When spring hits, everything comes to life, right? You just went through the winter, everything was dead or, dormant. And then spring hits and everything starts to bloom and blossom and plants start to grow and birds come back and bees and everything. Well, so do pests, y'all. Spring is horrible for pests. I got hit with leaf-footed bugs, cucumber beetles, aphids, what were those other things? Those big-eyed caterpillar worm things, army worms, one tomato hornworm. I got hit with a lot this year, and I know I'm missing something. Wire worms. So I got hit with a lot, and that's always the majority in spring, at least for me, here in Zone 9A, north of Houston. Pests are terrible, but think about it. It makes sense. They were dormant over the winter, right? Their eggs were dormant. They were in hibernation or whatever insects do, and then spring hits, and not just does everything start growing, well, those little punks come back and just start going crazy. Now, why is it different in the fall? Well, because we went through the summertime. And I don't know about where y'all are, but we're here hundreds for a month or two, just baking everything to death. And the pest pressure is so much lower in the summer. Well, it will come back a little bit in the fall, but not like in the spring. The spring is terrible for pests. The fall is a lot easier for pests, from what I have noticed and experienced here in my little tiny suburban backyard. So, big difference, pest pressure. If you are really prone to having a lot of pests, say, squash vine borers. How did I forget those? If you can't grow squash in the springtime because of the squash vine borers, try them in the fall. Maybe your area will be conducive for your squash and zucchini plants to grow. I have a very hard time growing squash, period. Doesn't matter what time of the year. I have trouble growing certain squashes. The rampicati zucchini I can grow like it's nothing, but certain squashes are hard, and it's because of the pests. So keep that in mind. If you have a hard time growing certain crops in the springtime because of pests, try growing them again in the fall. You might actually have a better fall harvesting season than you do in spring for certain crops. Okay, the second thing, frost dates, y'all. You have to know your frost dates for fall gardening. And why is that so important? Well, because certain crops are not frost friendly. They are not hardy at all once the temps start to hit those frost temps, and definitely freezing. So if you're in an area where you get an early frost dates, like maybe even right now in September, October, November. To me, those are early because my first expected frost date here, again in zone 9A, is always about December 1st. That's important to know because if you're going to plant certain crops, you have to take that frost date, your first expected frost date, and back up however long it takes you to grow whatever plant it is that you want to grow. And you have to know if the plant can handle some frost or not. So that is incredibly important for fall gardening. You want to always be, for me, I always want to be a season ahead. So if I'm in spring, I'm already thinking of summer. If I'm in summer, I'm already thinking of fall. If I'm in fall, I'm already thinking of winter. And you see how that goes because you want to be prepared that when those temps drop or get to a certain point for whatever season you're going into, you want to be ready to rock and roll and get your plants planted, your starts out there, or direct sow and get your seeds in the ground. And fall is another one of those seasons where you're coming out of the crazy heat, and then bam, it's like that overnight. Oh man, it's nice outside. I should have already had my stuff planted or already had my seeds started so I can get them in the ground. You have to be preparing for the next season, and knowing when your first expected frost date is incredibly important. You can just go onto Google, type in first expected frost date and your zip code, something to that effect, and it'll tell you what your date is for your area. All right, who doesn't like seeing butterflies in the garden, y'all? Seriously, look at that one right there. I love it. Look at that guy right there. Sitting there on that lantana. So beautiful. Man. You can't beat that, right? You're out here filming a video and you got nature all around you. All right, frost dates. Very important. I can't stress that enough. You have to know when your first expected frost date. And then when it comes to your spring garden, you have to know when your last expected frost date is. That way you can, again, back up the calendar 6 to 8 weeks prior to your last expected frost date is when you should start your seeds inside on your heat mats and your grow lights, so when spring hits for you, you can get them out there. But for fall, you got to know when that frost date is. Incredibly important. Okay, let's talk about this next point. Now, I haven't seen a lot of videos on this. I know M.I. Gardner did a video on this topic a couple years ago, which really was like, whoa, I never even thought of that. But that's a sun pattern. And you're thinking, Chad, what in the world are you talking about? What is the pattern in your garden area of the sun? Because think about it, in the spring and summertime, the sun is real high in the sky. So your sun pattern that goes across your yard will be different than, say, in fall and winter when the sun is lower in the sky. Does that make sense? Your shadows are going to be completely different. Your shaded areas are going to be completely different. So if you've got a crop that needs full sun in the fall, well, where is your full sun area in your garden in the fall? It might be completely different than what your full sun area is in the springtime. And that's why it's incredibly important that you know your backyard. And you could be saying, well, man, I've gardened in this garden, I've planted in this garden for 20 years. Okay, well, good. You definitely know your sun pattern. But what if you just moved into a new house? What if you're brand new to gardening and you're building your beds and you're trying to figure out where to plant everything, or this is your first fall and this is the first time you've ever even heard of the term sun pattern? Those are the things that as a new gardener you need to be made aware of, and I hope I'm doing that for you right now, because I didn't have a clue on my first fall, spring, summer, winter. I didn't know what a sun pattern was. Never even heard of it, but it made sense. And I'm going to give you an example right here. Okay, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and this area is full of sun. No shadows anywhere in this backyard at all. Now, if we fast forward to 5 o'clock tonight, this entire area to here, to right there, are shadowed. By 7 o'clock, just about everything from this section right here back still has sun, but the entire rest of this garden from here over is blocked by that house and my house. Now, why is that important? Well, because if you need something that needs 10 hours of sun, full sun, you have to know where to plant your plants. But here's the flip side. In the fall, you might have plants that don't need 10 hours of sun. They need 6 to 8 hours of sun and then shade the rest of the day. Well, you have to know where to plant your plants based on what they need and based on your sun pattern. So how do you figure out what your sun pattern is? Really simple, y'all. Go out in the morning, look at where the sun is. Mentally write that, mentally take a note or write it down. And then do that each hour for one day. Do it on a weekend. Every hour, every 2 hours, and see where the sun is. And then start marking that down in your head. Do that for each season, y'all. And then by the time you've done a full year, 4 full seasons of gardening, you will know exactly where your sun pattern is for your backyard. And that will help you know exactly where you can plant certain crops. So, number 3, sun pattern. Learn it. Now, okay, the 4th point might be a no-brainer, but I'm going to say it anyway. Make sure you plant the proper crops for your fall season. Now, I know you might be like, dude, that's complete common sense. Hey, for this guy, I was planting spring crops in the fall my first year thinking, oh man, they're going to do fine. It's the same weather for the most part, right? Well, yes and no. Here where I am, I don't have a true winter. So I can grow certain crops longer into other seasons. Basically, my fall crops are also my winter crops here. But that might not be the same for where you are. So you have to know which crops grow best for you in each season. And fall is no different. Most of the time, people are planting the brassicas in the fall. You're planting carrots, garlic, onions, radishes, turnips, root vegetables, beets, things of that nature in the fall because those plants can handle fall weather. You would not want to start planting, let's say, eggplant this time of year because by the time they take off and they get going, y'all are done. Even for me, my eggplants won't last much longer, another month or two. But if I planted them today, those eggplants would not produce anything in a month. Maybe 2 months, but it wouldn't be worth the time or the space that I'm taking up planting a crop that is not going to do anything in the fall. So planting the correct crops, knowing your area, which goes back to knowing your frost date, your sun patterns, everything I'm talking about is what you need to do for your fall garden. Also, preparing and thinking about your gardens. Super important. If you have a lot of gardens like I do, I'm constantly thinking, what am I going to plant there when I take this out? What am I going to put in this bed when I remove this? Or am I going to just shut this bed down for the fall and winter and just amend it so I'm ready for spring? Well, for your fall garden, definitely plant the correct crops. Or you're going to be discouraged, you're going to be upset, you're going to be like, oh man, I'm just not going to do this anymore. Well, don't do that. But that thought leads me into my 5th and final point. Okay, so my final point is just simply this. Plant a fall garden. If you normally take time off because of your weather or your situation and you almost never plant a fall garden, I challenge you to plant a fall garden this year. Even if it's something small, throw carrots out, let carrots grow. Carrots are great through the winter. Why not? Let them grow. Throw out some garlic. Those things take 9 months to grow. They'll grow through the winter. Let them grow. Just plant a fall garden. What does that do? Well, 1, it gets you growing. It keeps you engaged in gardening. 2, it keeps something growing in your soil. Your soil is staying active. It's not going, dormant or inert or whatever. It's going to continue being alive and thriving. 3, you are still gardening, y'all. So plant a fall garden. Don't take the time off. That's my advice to you. Even if you've had trouble growing things and you're like, man, I'm just not doing a fall garden. Well, that's how I felt about spring. I got hit so hard with so many pests, I actually thought, man, I'm not doing a spring garden anymore. It's not even worth my time. I'm just discouraged all the time. But every year I plant every year I plant a spring garden. I'm super excited. I'm ready to get back in the garden after 3 months of the garden being barren for the most part. And I'm ready to rock and roll. So if you normally don't plant a fall garden, please do. Try one, even something small. Just get something growing. Two, if you are going to take the time off and you're like, you know what, Chad, I'm just, you don't know my situation, I'm just taking fall off. Well, great. Do something though that is productive for your garden for spring, and that's amend everything. Amend all your beds. Get that fresh compost out there. Get those fresh soils out there. Lay down your amendments. Whatever you do for your beds, do that if you're going to take the fall and winter off. Make sure that you are allowing nature to put those nutrients deep into your ground, into your garden beds. So when your spring hits, y'all, you're ready to rock and roll, and you're going to grow the world's largest tomato or cucumbers or whatever. Just be active if you're going to take the fall off. And the best way I can think of to be active if you're taking a break from gardening in the fall is to amend all of your beds. Spend that time in the fall. Focus on family and the holidays and everything, and Christmas and Thanksgiving. Time with your family, New Year's, through the winters. So when spring hits, you don't even have to worry about amending. Your beds are ready to rock and roll. They're fertile. They're ready to just produce. Those are my two advices for you in the fall. Plant a garden, which I hope you do, or amend so you are ready for spring. All right, everyone, so that's the video. Those are the 5 things that I thought of right off the top of my head that I wish I had known or done more research on for my first few fall gardens. I hope this helps you in some way or another. I hope you got something out of this video, and I hope you are encouraged, if you had not planned on doing a fall garden, to do one, or to at least amend. Super important. I know I say that a lot, but that is very, very important. Amend your beds. If y'all enjoyed this video, do me the 3 favors: share, like, and subscribe to this channel if you've not done so already. I would love to have all of you join all of us here on this fast-growing community of like-minded gardeners. Y'all take care, God bless, continue to shine bright, harvest hard, prepare for the fall. If you've already prepared for the fall, I hope your fall gardens are going great, at least starting out great. I'll talk to y'all again real soon. Bye. Okay, so my final point is just simply this: plant a fall garden. Don't Y'all ever look at a plane and wonder where they're going, and then kind of like make up stories about who's on the plane, where they're going? Or is it just me?